So what we're doing here is we have 3 different topics that we're going to cover. They're not, it is mostly about talking, sharing ideas, writing docs, like figuring out process. Nothing here is going to be really technical. If you are here because you want to like work with an engineer, or if you want to hack on a project, or if you want to get something solved or get some advice, or do some pair programming, or any of the other hack projects that we typically do on a community day, that's back at the other room. Or whatever, we'll see what how that works out. But this is all about like process right now. So the 3 topics that we're going to talk about, I want to kind of do them in parallel a little bit. First, I'll have each one of you come up and talk about what we'll be doing a little bit, and then we'll just kind of like try to break into the groups that are interested in those topics, and so that we can collaboratively, all separately, come up with some solutions and some working docs and processes for what we're going to do. Sound good? So that would be Garrett. You're going the wrong direction here. Let's start with Garrett, since he's standing up. Sorry. Just giving you a chance.
You want to talk about governance?
So what I'd like to do is like spend maybe 5 minutes sort of setting out the what we are, where we're at, what we need to resolve, and maybe a little bit about like the process you want to go through today to figure out what governance is, and then pick a corner, and people who are interested in that can kind of follow you. And then Gene and Nick will do the same thing for the other 2 topics up there. And the pen is a little bit light, so if you can't read it, that's infrastructure. So that would be things like VM Floaty he was talking about earlier, or the rsync. We're working on getting rsync for our packages. And then the technical steering, like how do we decide what our roadmap is? How do we decide what we're going to be building and how we're building it, and making a lot of the implementation details that we sort of like hand waved away earlier today. That'll be Nick talking about that. Intro to the what you're.
Yep. Right. So I'm interested in helping out with like governance and discussing governance with all of you. As we agreed that OpenVox is moving, what is now OpenVox is moving under Vox Populi. I think that means that we need to change the scope of Vox Populi governance. Vox Populi is meant to manage our modules and some linters and like things like this, and the responsibilities for modules is very different than the responsibilities of OpenVox, especially with regards to managing like CVEs. If we can't do that, it's not really a viable software. And so because of that, I think we have different needs. We have different folks that should be represented in different processes so that we can be transparent. I think that's going to be key for us having credibility. And without credibility, folks are going to say, do I pay Puppet, do I not? And this other thing, I'm not sure, so maybe we just do something else. And so to help us maintain that credibility, I think we should have a very open and transparent structure for governance. Again, if that's something you're interested in, I'll be chatting about that. I saw Gene like wandering away.
He went to get a drink. He'll be right back. I can go.
Nick, yeah.
Sorry, is this like a 60-second pitch of what we're doing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So for technical steering, I would like to put together a team of people who we can, bounce ideas off each other about things, small and large. So small, like package naming; large, like we want to change how the exec resource works or something. I have some ideas about how we can structure that. I don't want to get bogged down too much in structure, but we're going to need some process for when we disagree on things and how we move forward from there, and maybe some more formal processes around, especially when we're doing like big changes, having like a technical lead who's kind of pushing it forward, and then people who are contributing, and then perhaps even doing something like a technical design document where we can kind of plan out what we're going to do before we just go in and break everything. So, high-level idea there.
So Nick just better described what we want to do with like governance. So I think technical and governance are really
They'd be very
same thing.
similar. Technical, I imagine, is focusing much more on the code and the actual like architecture.
That's what the governance is. It's saying
Well, maybe it's the same.
like what does it mean to be have like merge access? What does it mean to be on the core committee? I think that's the same as like steering. Like when do we submit proposals? When is it okay to just press merge, and when do we need to like solicit more like feedback?
Okay, well, let's see where.
I have a question then. So the Puppet server right now is running on the JVM. One of the proposals out there is, hey, maybe it's time that we get out of the JVM and make a very large architectural change. Who decides that? Who like approves whether or not we do that?
Yeah, so I think that's part of like governance is like how do you submit a proposal like that? That's essentially an architectural change or a breaking change, and like what does that process like look like?
So I think there can be a split between. There's going to be a lot of governance things that are not technical. There are going to be things that are like organizational, and how do we look at perforce, and how do we form a security team, these kinds of things, and then there's going to be technical, actual OpenVox, technical questions we need to answer. So
Talking about the same thing.
So I think we can figure out where the overlaps are and where they aren't.
Yeah, just question, because I think I'm interested in both, but the thing I'm probably most interested in is content provided and managed within OpenVox, or right? So I feel like I'm halfway between you two. Like, if, for example, if I wanted to say all of the Secura compliance modules are open source, and I want to work with Vox modules and have some of ours in there, like, because that really is the conversation, right? Well, I am not clear on where I go here.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're clear on where we're going.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we'll figure that out.
Okay, sounds good.
Talk a little bit more.
I mean, that one in particular is an easy one. That's the box modules. That's the answer. That's anything module related or bringing modules in is a well-established pattern of hit up the mailing list. Maybe start in Slack, hit up the mailing list.
Sure.
Well, it was my brain fart that there is some overlap between the two, and to avoid actually these frictions, I would suggest that the technical steering would be self-sufficient in the sense that whenever there is a proposal for change, that when it's not breaking or it's not a complete paradigm shift, like exiting the JVM and going to something different, that the governance should not be really involved. And when it does, like exiting the JVM into something, because that changes a lot of things and could possibly break existing customer users and so on, that then you will have the governance committee added, but as a sort of approval. The technical steering anyways will have to be on to do the technical nitty-gritty and provide all the tests, and so, hey, this new change of idea works. Will it work for our users? Will it work for our training, our consultancy? Because governance is much more than just our little thing. It's also going to the outside world and provide new blocks of training, consulting, certifications, things like that.
So the way, yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, and the way I see it, and it doesn't have to be this way, throw it back if you don't like it, but governance, if you think of kind of a typical software engineering structure, governance is more the product management side, and technical is more the engineering side, and they have to talk to each other, and they have to collaborate.
I think we have overlaps, so instead of debating whether they're overlapped or not, we should just let Gene give his pitch, and then maybe you and I can all speak together on what is both.
If you take it in software engineering terms, I would say governance describes the interface, and technical steering will define the implementation of that interface.
Gene, do you have a pitch for
You're up.
Infrastructure.
I mean, most of it I've already said.
So, you missed a little
Yeah,
bit about.
sorry.
No,
Yes.
that's fine. We're gonna try to, because we're short on time, we're gonna try to parallelize a little bit. So, you're here to talk and decide some things about infrastructure, you know, like what we've already talked about. So you give a pitch about like the kinds of things you're gonna talk about and the kinds of decisions you're gonna make today and whether you're like doing a roadmap or
Okay.
like whatever.
So like next steps, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
A couple of minutes about what you wanna talk about.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna break up into either
And
two
so
or
people know whether they want to hang out with you or not.
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
cool. I mentioned things that we need to solve for earlier, like repositories and places to run tests and how we go about running tests. That's pretty much what the infrastructure is. The one thing I didn't mention earlier that falls under that is I put up a proposal that was well received recently about managing GitHub using OpenTofu. For anybody who hasn't heard, we have been gifted GitHub Enterprise as an elevation above the GitHub teams that they were already giving us, which will allow us to govern more than one organization in GitHub and give us some additional features, so there'll probably be some conversation about that. If there's any question about I'm gonna talk about infrastructure-wise, feel free to pipe up, but it's really just going a little deeper on the topics that I've already talked about.
And mirroring.
Oh, yeah.
Rsync and mirroring.
Yeah, rsync app yum. Got ideas on how to do that. Need to get some feedback so that we can make it happen. On the app side, especially Debbie in person, definitely needs some help from you because there's got to be a bit way better than Apply for us to do some of that. And if there's not, then we need to figure out how we're screwing it up more than what Apply just screwed up already. But
Do we need anything?
yes, we do need rsync.
Let's just take a.
It's also an easy one.
How many folks are interested in talking about infrastructure stuff? So just so we can like split up the room. Okay, so that's like most of the room. How many folks care about like technical steering and governance? Also like most of the room.
In fairness, I
So-
care about all of these also.
Why don't we just like start with like infrastructure and set like a time and then we'll switch or something. So
Okay.
it seems like we have
We have 2 hours.
overlap.
I think I can get mine done in the next 20 minutes, especially if somebody holds me accountable.
Let's just talk
Okay,
about it.
if we think that we could do, cover everything in 2 hours, then maybe we don't need to split up into groups.
I think we can.
Well,
then
it
let's
seems like
go.
everybody's interested in
241.
both.
Let's go.
Cool. All right, so easy ones first. There have been requests for us to provide rsync to other people. I also think we need rsync. The solution for that, barring any objections, is we have credits with Hetzner that Tim may be aware of. Thank you guys. Where the hell is he? It's in here somewhere. We set up a simple Nginx server on Hetzner. Going to one way or another, got a couple ideas on how, but one way or another, get the information out of S3 and onto that box, provide the rsync interface from there that others can use to then serve their mirrors from, since a lot of people like to interface like that. I see what we call it once. Hang on one second. From there, we were also from that same system going to provide basically the base app and yum DNS names like app.voxpopuli.org and yum.vox. And those would be initially just a simple redirect to the OSL ones. Once we have additional mirrors, the Yum one would utilize Mirror Select or Mirror Select 2 or whatever the same option is that the Fedora project and other major projects use. The Debian one, we would need to figure out how to best handle that one. Whether it be redirect to our default one at OSL and what we need to do to provide the stuff so that Mirror Picker or whatever the thing is called that lets you pick your fastest mirror so that it works. We have multiple organizations who are already offering to provide mirrors. We just need to give them a reasonable way to do it. Yes.
I have a comment because I've been like working on this.
Yes.
And so we have a ticket open now with OSU's OSL, the open source labs at Oregon State
State,
University. And so there's like a ticket now to turn on rsync to make that happen.
I thought they said they couldn't do it.
Nope, they said they could do it.
Sweet, even better.
That's what I put in Slack. So
Okay.
I'm like working with Lance on this. There's a ticket open that was just on the 31st. So they're like looking into like how to do this for us. And then speaking with him, he's happy for us to host with them, figure out our sync so that we can get it out to other folks.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, so we can definitely do that. That sounds great. That's even better than what I was thinking of.
One small note, within the forum project we're sponsored by Fastly, who provides CDN access. So what we host, we have a simple web server at Oregon State as well. And then Fastly is actually sort of the front end for it. Might be interesting to talk to them as well if they are interested in sponsoring OpenVox.
Do you happen to have the ability to contact y'all's contact at Fastly to like hook us up?
I can try it, but mostly my colleague Evgeny who set it up.
Okay.
But you got to contact via the Debian people and sort of the.
Yeah, so
I think like University of Chicago has also reached out that they
Yeah.
want to mirror. So
Yeah,
once we
there's-
have our sync,
Rackspace has already said they want to mirror with the geographically distributed. I'm assuming it
Yeah.
has.
that's awesome.
We've got mirrors, we've just got to make it so that people can get to them. And then when using Yum, that it will go to the best one for them because unlike Dev, Yum and DNF have that shit figured out. You have to manually run a command to do it yourself on app-based systems, but at least we need to fit within the ecosystem so that we can be good stewards and take advantage of the graciousness of the other people. Cool.
Edward, can you remind us why, like, the foreman dropped our sync support day and just
Mostly
stopped it?
because Evgeny didn't want to manage it anymore.
Oh, okay.
And I think you were the only user.
Which means you can manage it if you want to.
Yeah, I've got no trouble managing the rsync stuff. I mean, I've basically ran Puppet's rsync infrastructure for 7 years, and it took me less than a week's worth of time the entire 7 years. It's not a big deal to run the rsync infrastructure. It's one service. It's not hard.
But all your Yum stuff otherwise comes from like a content delivery network as well, doesn't it? So there isn't this mirror
Yeah.
selection stuff going on.
Yeah.
But we won't have to run anything at all. Like the idea is we'll be able to use like OSL and then
Yeah.
folks can mirror. From
Yeah, the
there.
idea is that we will get, with the exception, well, not even the exception now, but the idea is that the base place people go is type.voxpagula.org. So it's us. And that gets people to where they need to be. Whether that's which platform you're talking about, how that works is going to vary. And under that same theory, you know, the old Puppet site had a download, so like downloads.puppet.com or something, and that's where you could go manually grab the MSIs for Windows, and things like that, or the DPGs for Mac OS. Like, we're going to need something equivalent of that. And the idea is to basically take that structure that is not just common to Puppet, but is common to most projects where they have that project name prefix subdomain of stuff, to provide those, but using other people's infrastructure as much as humanly possible. And in a way that is as little effort for us as possible.
I do like, by the way, the downloads website because the Puppet at least had GPG signed releases on there, and that's what I always used in my Fluor packaging of it.
Yeah, I know Nick's been signing all of our packages. We will absolutely make sure as part of this to get, if he hasn't already done it, to make sure that the GPG keys that are used for signing are consumable. Like the Young repo should be targeting where to grab the GPG key from so they can verify everything. Whole 9 yards. Like, we want to sign everything. There's no reason not to these days.
The public key is included in the RPM
In the
demo.
release, RPM. Yeah, so, yeah, this is,
And we do need to make sure that the key is available outside of the RPM.
oh, absolutely.
It is.
It'll be sitting there in plain text, just like it is on most
Yeah.
repos.
I tried to keep ours as close to Puppet's existing one as possible.
It was actually a pretty reasonable setup, so that was a good
yeah.
thing.
And we can make changes.
The other infrastructure thing that I had on my mind, unless somebody else has something, I mostly said it a few minutes ago. We've got 2 GitHub boards now. We've got the OpenVox project and Vox Populi. There's all the work to manage GitHub is done by hand by the PMC right now, which also means that across repositories that there is absolutely no hope of consistency regardless of how much effort is put in, because there's 218 module repositories, I think you said, not counting all the tooling repositories. I mean, shit, I think I moved 60 different Beaker repositories to Vox alone. So,
Let's use Terraform, right? Or
yeah, so we're going to open tofu that. Ideally, we'll get to use a little bit of some of the credits that were talked about so that we can use the DynamoDB backend as the state store, because that provides consistency and locking, and it's the best option of the ones available. And the cost of running that is very, very small, especially if we have some credits. But that will allow us to manage, have consistency across the entirety of our GitHub infrastructure, and add and remove people in the same ways, and there will be an audit trail provided by this because it'll all be done in Git. All the workflows would be, all the tofu workflows would be triggered by GitHub Actions. So, barring objection to that, I'm going to try and get my coworker Jake Spain, who is named Yachube or something like that, on Slack to run with that because he set it up before a couple of times.
Could you talk about the team structure you want to set up and how people can volunteer or get involved with it for running the infrastructure? I'm assuming it's not going to be all you.
Oh, hell no, it's not going to be all me. Well, I guess, so there's a couple buckets of teams. The last piece of infrastructure was the infrastructure for CI and packaging, and I lumped those together because they're massively overlapped. Since we talked earlier, we have gotten the offer of one big-ass Kubernetes cluster to run stuff in. And so I'm still 100% for doing as much in GitHub Actions as possible. Nick reminded me of a very real thing, that there were a series of test failures that were a byproduct of random whack-ass transients. Some of that was attributed to Pooler, some of it was attributed to things that were wrapping VM Pooler at Puppet, some of it was just networking. I don't think it's enough to cause us big problems, but it's definitely something we would be cognizant of. But I think we can do, VM Pooler itself can run natively in Kubernetes, that's what it does today. And with a little bit of work for anybody who's willing to put in the work, could use KubeVirt as a backend. And so we could do our CI testing and our acceptance testing using KubeVirt VMs for the majority of things. I don't think we're going to need a whole lot of it, because I think a lot of it we can do in GitHub Actions and in containers. But the prime example I like to give people, you can't test systemd, you can't do an acceptance test for systemd without systemd. What do you not have in most containers? Systemd. You can't truly test modifying, doing like the Aegis things that modify kernel parameters and kernel settings when you don't actually get to control those. And so there are things that we can't do in containers, but a lot of it we can. That's only use the VMs where we need them. And then Tim might have been who it was, but somebody pointed out earlier that with Kubernetes there is an ability for us to use that cluster for GitHub Actions runners also. I don't know anything about it, but it sounded really cool, and it sounds like it solves a real need we had. And so I think that part will be immediately useful. And so what we need help with from a logistics point of view is people to work on CI infrastructure, people to work on the GitHub org, and the management of that, and then the storage and presentation of assets, basically. So repositories, the storage of all that, and the systems that do that work. And to stay within my time frame, I don't want to take a bunch of verbal volunteers, but please hit me up in Slack. Also, my memory sucks and I will forget that you have volunteered. And I recognize most of your faces now, but I don't know how you map to your names in Slack, so I would forget that anyways, and it wouldn't work. So please hit me up in Slack if you're interested in helping. Also, again, if you're interested in helping with security, feel free to ping me. I'll get you in touch with my boss, Christopher Stitt. My name is, I'll put my name up here on the board because many of y'all have no reason to know it. It's Gene Bean. When you see the little avatar, it's a little green Android guy with alien antennas sticking off his head. It's the only one. Yeah.
Sort of related to that, maybe also governance, but at some point we will also have secrets.
Yes.
And earlier Tim and I were talking about, currently we have at least one file, which is not great.
Yeah.
We were suggesting GoPass,
You're suggesting what?
GoPass.
GoPass?
Yeah, which is basically use a Git repository, encrypt files, etc. And within the form project, we use it and like it quite a lot. You can actually mount multiple stores, so you can say this team has this store and that team has that store, and that's what Ruben is at least my suggestion. But also tie it into the governance model.
Yeah.
How do we decide someone actually gets access to that? Because that's sometimes critical security
I mean, it's
issues.
keys to the kingdom in a lot of
Yes.
cases. I definitely think that's a discussion we need to have. I'm really interested to learn more about the tool you're talking about. A tool that we have available to us also is 1Password. They give it to free for open source projects. I helped the Scale conference get access to it. If Scale can get it, we can damn sure get it.
What I really like about the GoPass is just a Git repository that
Yeah.
has everything. But
Yeah.
I just want to put it on agenda to investigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just way less complexity with the seasoning of GPG on top. That's it.
So it does use what, GPG underneath it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's,
So, I don't,
that's a base of.
so that we have time for the other topics, let's not get bogged down in this. But I do think that is something that is well worth bringing up. Food for thought for everybody who's thinking about this. Also, SOPs, SOPS, is a really, really worthwhile way of doing it. That's how I manage my secrets in a public GitHub repository today. It's one of the recommended ways from the Nix project. Y'all heard plenty about Nix out here. But because of that, there's a lot of good options around that. It's also created by Mozilla and they use it actively for their infrastructure. Yeah.
Did you realise we've got a separate GitHub organisation for our security and Terraform stuff from like 5 years ago? It didn't go very far, but it does.
I know there
exist.
was an open issue about it.
No, there's a whole org. I'll invite you to it.
Oh, yes, I did not know about that. That would be very good to know about.
I mean, there's nothing in there really, but
Okay.
it did
Well,
exist.
Alex, as soon as we finish with the enterprise, we can group
Yeah.
them all together.
Right. Yeah.
I have a question. Is an X or an actual Puppet engineer here can say how much traffic over the mirror goes, so that we have some expectations?
A shit ton. It will make you
That's a
cry.
technical term.
Because this will cost money if you have a mirror thing going on.
Yes, mirroring will cost you money unless you have very, very high bandwidth allocations. I do not suggest anybody offer up a mirror from a private VPS or from their home. It will cost you money or will get your internet turned off.
You can get enough free instances from
Yeah, well,
knows who to contact.
yeah, we won't.
So,
But
and if you need more, let me know. Even I have a few here in Europe that I can help out with. So,
with
but
the
privately,
people that
no.
the universities and corporations that are offering to do the mirroring, I think they all understand what that entails and have the bandwidth and capacity to do it.
You think or we know?
Well, I know Rackspace does. I know that.
I hope I do.
Yeah. I know the University of Chicago, based off of the conversations that we had with them in Slack, they're pretty well informed. And the nice thing about the way I was talking about doing it is it's self-service to pull yourself back out of it if you find out that it's too much.
I have a small question which also relates a little bit to the governance part, but mostly to the infrastructure.
Mhm.
The OpenVox community, in what kind of a legal entity does it run? Does it run as a non-profit? Because if yes, then it might be eligible to appeal to some resources that are government run, like for example here in Belgium, Belnet, which already mirrors Debian
That would
and
be
such
right.
ways and so on.
Yeah.
Tim could
Tim,
probably.
Tim can probably speak to that best.
We're not a legal entity like that, but we run through Open Collective, which allows us to pretend that we are.
Yeah.
And the pathway was started, though we haven't gotten there yet, and we may still decide not to pursue it, but the pathway was started to get us incorporated into the Linux Foundation. We happen to have some really good contacts there, including a spouse who works there. And that process has started, but to get going, we're under Open Source Collective, but that would be bringing all of Vox under the Linux Foundation. If you're under the Linux Foundation, that project is clearly going to be eligible for a lot of things. Like companies know that if you're under LF, you fit the criteria for like mirroring and stuff like that. So. And yes, please don't let us forget about that though. Yes. the options available to legal nonprofits is really, really nice.
Is the Open Collective, Tim, is that a 501c3?
It's a 501 something something.
Yeah, so
It's
they
a
can,
6. It's not a 3.
it's a 6, I see.
Is that better? Higher numbers are better?
501c3 is the one that gets you all the stuff. Everything else only gets you partway there.
It's also-
501c3 is the one you want.
It's nice from the sponsor side too, because we can use it as a tax write-off
Yep.
if you are a 501c3. I don't know about all of the designations, but for sure if you're 501c3 we can, which is
You should
pretty
be able to
awesome.
do that with Open Collective now.
Yeah, I believe that this is just one of those, I'm not a lawyer, so don't want to promise
Yeah.
anything conversations.
Do we have a lawyer in the room?
I hope not.
You know, that's actually a legitimately good point. Something that might be worth strongly looking into is if any of the companies that are represented in this room, if their legal departments are willing to, in writing, agree to help us with legal questions.
That's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hell of a challenge, I know, but at some
You need
point,
someone with in-house counsel, the rest of us are paying $7.50 an hour just to ask questions.
No,
so
you
it's-
just ask the Free Software Foundation.
That is
Okay.
one of the
That's the
advantages
only
of going
other
over the
option.
LF.
Free
Right.
Software
Yeah.
Foundation
Yeah.
will give you limited free legal advice.
that's awesome.
So
These are things I have no reason to know until now, so that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Gene, like I said, that is another advantage of going over the LF because they actually do have legal
Yeah.
counsel.
Yeah, I mean,
Whatever physical height you choose should have that as a resource.
yeah, that's even better. Yeah. Just because it's mentioned, I'm gonna shut up, but this kind of overlaps with the governance. Are there any actual objections in here to the Linux Foundation stuff?
Yeah, I think like right now we're all just trying to get into Vox Populi and have real packages that
Yeah.
get patched and get packaged.
I 100% agree, just make sure nobody had like three long standing, like, no, we don't wanna do it because of filling it.
Like, personally, I think we should become a real thing and actually have packages and like a software that works, and then see, at that point, do we want to transition from Vox Populi and Open Collective and move Vox Populi under something like LF, or there's lots of other options. I just think we're not.
We're not,
Like,
I don't
we're
think
not
we're
there
there.
Yeah, no,
I
I'm
think that,
not
honestly,
myself.
that's a conversation for next year at this time.
I
Even
think
better,
so. I think so.
even better.
the LF comes with a lot of overhead and a lot of costs.
Yeah.
So
There's
don't forget
there's
that.
like pros and cons in that.
Cool. Good to know.
Cool. Do you wanna start governance, or where are we gonna?
The last thing maybe in regards to infrastructure was the repository stuff, having a solution for athlete, or something else. Pulp apparently supports Debian right now, as of their latest read. Ish, ish, but it would fit our needs for, at the same time, providing deb packages and all that. Is that something that is viable?
Well, I think
Palpable?
I think OSL is going to support us for that.
No, he's talking about like pulp developers actually working on that. We have discussions going on about that. So yes, by next year, we should have that, as in pulp will officially support it, and then we'll get Lance to host it for us and propagate it to the rest of the world.
So it might be a case of where it might be a case where for now, Apply remains the presentation layer, and then next year we can transition to Pulp.
Says it's already available, so.
Yeah, but for some values. There are a few bugs. The deb packages should be up to date. The RPMs obviously functional, but it would do Puppet modules also in the future.
That would be interesting.
That's the
Pretty stoked
discussion
by
we
that.
had.
Yeah, that's really great.
Last part, when you said Puppet modules, am I to hear that you're delivering Puppet modules as RPM and Debian packages? Is that what
No,
you're
no,
saying?
no.
Okay.
And also, not him, who was saying that Pulp supports multiple kinds of repositories. And they came by earlier yesterday to say, hey, you know, like here's a repository. Can we support like Puppet modules as repositories?
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Yep.
But for anybody who's not aware, like the use case of that is it's one internal mirroring of modules, but the other is versioned repositories of your modules so that you can have a release process for your entire modules repository.
And what I'm also like to, like, currently there's no talk about the forge closing, but if you have code ready
Yeah.
at that point, we have a backup plan.
And just to be clear, we've talked about Forge in Slack a lot. We all know that we need a plan for if and when it does go away. We also know that that is not a problem we need to solve right now. There are other problems we need to deal with now. We're not ignorant to what could happen with the Forge, but there's no immediate danger there. And we have immediate challenges like providing basic functionality that we need to deal with first. That's why I didn't say anything about it earlier.
Well, with like David standing here, I think we can get like a comment like about the Forge's future.
So I know Ben mentioned there was another stage in the previous VP product who was talking about more monetization of Forge to allow people to kind of sell modules easier. That has been cancelled. There is no intention to put exclusivity in the Forge. And I think anything we do, we can kind of work with the module specifications and things like that to look for compatibility.
We always want to have a contingency plan, but it's not a problem. It's not a bridge we've got to worry about burning right this minute.
How about some governance?
Okay, so a month ago today, I put in a pull request to the governance doc. If you look at voxpopuli/plumbing on GitHub, you'll see there's like one PR that's there. There's lots of responses. And one of the big questions that came up is, what does it really mean to be a contributor? And what are which is like you have merge access, right? And so lots of us do. I think Tim, you said it was like 218 or something plus, which is fantastic, right? We hopefully have like a small amount of people that are like drive-by, a lot of people that are like a part of it, and then again a small amount of people on the PMC, or basically the Vox Populi board that steer things and act as the arbitration if things can't be decided. They like step in. One of the things that came up from that is how do we deal with change, and what things need community buy-in, and what things need to just be done. And I think there's two real differing areas for that, and one being the modules, and one being Puppet itself or OpenVox and like that core. I think the modules is obviously more established, and so maybe we should just start there. But the idea that like other projects use is like enhancement proposals. So like Python does this. If you remember, like Henrik did this for the Puppet language when he was changing it. He put out these like proposals for it, and folks like commented there. And so the idea is like for these massive like changes, you would actually draw up an abstract and discuss, why you want to make this change and get like feedback from the community. So let's just start with like modules, because that's the easiest part. What are the things for a module? So step back. Are folks familiar with semantic versioning? Right, we've got like 1, 2, 3, so like major, minor, and then patch. So I think everyone agrees, like, if we're only fixing something, you should just fix things as like soon as possible. We get peer review. We always get like a +1. I think everybody's like on board with that. For like modules, how much discussion is like needed for enhancements? Are there certain things that we know need like a large amount of discussion versus things that don't?
I think the major discussions that we had in the past is being sure that the enhancement is not a breaking change.
Yeah.
So like doing a proper code review and ensuring that it's really just new behavior that's introduced and doesn't break existing stuff.
Like adding an extra type or an extra provider or something.
Something like that, or adding support for a new operating system, something like this.
I think we're all on the same page there. Enhancements should be enhancements and not like breaking changes. Yeah.
So, having managed an open source community for like a really long time, I think one of the only things that we did particularly well was say like things like enhancements didn't need extra levels of review so long as you could guarantee or trust that you have a minimum set of regression tests that properly define what that module should do. So like if you have an enhancement, like it's truly an enhancement or a new feature, and you commit that and you are able to trust like regression tests that you have not broken something, then I don't think that that should be as strictly guarded as, let's say, maybe it needs to change, but maybe it does impact what those are. I mean, there's a few strategies here, but I think that works well, and I think that's the quickest path to getting new stuff in.
So for modules, if there's an enhancement, there's tests, there's documentation, we feel good about just merging. Are there times when the enhancement or something you would want there to be more like conversation before somebody just press merge?
Yeah, I think the biggest reason to have more debate is when you add something, is it the right way, or will you need to do a break and change after to change it because it's actually not a good implementation? So if it's a small enhancement where you just add an OS version, that's usually okay, but if you add extra parameters, is it like the right design? That kind of thing might be a reason to have more discussion.
Would you say that exists outside the scope of linting, though? Because theoretically, that's what your linter is supposed to do for you, right?
No, but like, is that outside the scope of just getting like peer review? Like, at what point do you want more than just one other person to go, that looks good, but we actually need to like say we're gonna like let this go for a certain time period or get so many plus ones?
I think this is one of those. There's no hard. Then we need extra review, and then we don't. I think in general, it's whenever I review something, it's more of a feeling like, yeah, this might not be a good API. It may be a good API.
How do we get that out of the feelings to like transparency?
There's no way to know.
Yeah.
There's no way to describe what is going to be
No.
useful, correct, make sense at all. It can be perfect code, but not make sense.
In an open source project, you have to default on accepting contributions.
That's the latest consensus.
Completely agree.
Right. So
That's
you can't put a whole lot of barriers to entry on this kind of thing.
I do think that we have reached the size and complexity level that a single approval is not sufficient.
Universally?
I think a minimum of 2 approvals is needed.
And this is for modules.
Even on modules.
We might
I
get
deal
nothing
with
merged.
modules every day of the week, and I can't tell you the number of times the second reviewer is who catches something. Because when you're talking about the implementation details, if you've got the author and 2 other sets of eyes on it, you've got a much, much better chance of catching something. And with the size of our org, to get 2 people to glance at something that you want the org to continue to carry forward doesn't seem like an unreasonable barrier to me.
I think it depends on the module, how much it's used, and how much other modules depend on it. For example, we have some things that are, like if you look at standard lib, that's maybe an extreme example, but standard lib is used everywhere. So that is, to me, it has a much higher barrier to merging. If it's more like a leaf package that's not used by other people, it's probably okay to get one pair of eyes.
Are we gonna declare like tiers then, so that it's like clear you're a tier 1 module?
That's impossible.
Yeah,
just from experience, that's truly impossible.
Is it really that hard to ask on Slack if somebody could just take a look at something though?
Yes.
Historically, it has been. There have been some pull requests where people have been waiting for months for one review, like one set of lines.
Then maybe what we need is a project manager of sorts that just actually looks through PRs and is like, oh, this has been installed for a while or whatever.
Can we perhaps sort of try to agree in the sense when a single reviewer is sufficient and when is not? And I believe that a single reviewer is enough when, if and only if, the change that is being rolled, the enhancement, does not break existing things.
Well,
but there's no way to
There's no way to know that. Wait.
Yeah, we do.
Wait. So when you said adding a new feature. Well, okay, great. That the feature is defaulting to something that does not break anything else. Provide all the tests, because the thing often is not providing sufficient tests to demonstrate that your change is leaving everybody else alone. I believe that one reviewer should be enough if the change, the enhancement does not break previous workings, to demonstrate with testing that it does your intention while leaving everybody else alone. Once you start noticing that your tests show that, hey, there's a problem here, then you need a set.
So the test coverage is so inconsistent, but I wonder if, like, from like an automation point of
He's
view,
saying that you have to have tests, and just about errors, like if it's an enhancement, we can always break things, but enhancements meant to be like backward compatible.
and it's still that one person who's reviewed it, who's then sort of deciding, is it really just an enhancement or was it a breaking change? Is it trivial? Is it not trivial? After it's been approved by one person, do we just set like a timer on, it can't be merged for at least 4 days or something, to give the opportunity for somebody to add their review, but if nobody else objects within some automated time period, then it can go in with a single.
That's what some other projects do. They like queue up their enhancements and say they're gonna sit for so long. And so, like, do we want to go time-based? Because time-based takes longer than finding like +2.
But then maybe you can override the having to wait because you have got an extra, you have got that second or third reviewer or something. So it would just be, I mean, I don't think people like it when they review something, they look at it, and before they've had a chance to type in, oh, I think this is going to break something or whatever, somebody's already clicked merge, because they were just like there, ready to go as soon as that approval appeared.
Does GitHub support any of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there's time, so like we can say you have to wait that amount of time.
I mean, there are certain plugins and things. I'm sure we could.
Sounds safe enough to try.
Yeah.
Probably easy to.
But do folks like time-based? Do folks like a mix of like time and multiple approvers? I mean,
The mix.
what do folks think?
Especially because we have like a crowd of so many time zones.
Yeah.
Like even in the span of a workday, a PR can be approved in the morning and then we wait 8 hours, but 8 hours is not enough because some people might just be waking up after sleeping and then.
So do people want to have like 1+1 and then you also have to wait X time?
I'd say if you have if you've had 2 pairs of eyes, you probably save. If you have
Yeah.
1 pair of eyes, you wait 24 or 2 days,
As we
wait
just
48
said,
hours.
either a time 2 days or 4 days or 2 reviews.
So the second review cancels out the time window, or cancels out the time requirement.
So what time is like reasonable?
Not less than 2 days.
And what's the laziest consensus window that we have? There you go.
72 hours, I don't know.
I didn't hear that. What times did people think was reasonable?
I was just saying, if the lazy consensus window we have now is a week, if you can't get your 2 reviews within a week, well, then go ahead and move forward.
Then like 1 review is okay?
Yeah.
Doesn't that actually also depend if the change is, what kind of change it is? 'Cause
So when you're implementing these
Yeah.
checks and these requirements at a technical level, you don't know what kind of change it is, so it has to cover all scenarios.
I know.
It's impossible to know before if it's going to be
I
breaking
know
change.
that's the.
I mean, I think we've actually been in the past quite good at self-policing. So if I know I put forward a change that could be problematic or some people might have different views on, maybe I have got it reviewed and somebody's ticked it. But on purpose, I've then left it for over the weekend or whatever because I think, well, I've got to be fair on people.
maybe
So
you can also
it is
put-
tricky to know what you would do if you were going to like strictly put like an automatic.
Could I ask really quick, what is the scope of this
We're
conversation? Because it sounds
talking about enhancements to modules specifically.
so basically like a whether or not pull requests should be merged.
Yes,
Seems
we're
like
talking in terms of
we
semantic
don't
versioning. Yeah.
really have a lot of time here. It seems like we should be deciding like more like the governance docs of like
So this
here's
is governance. It says how do we do change.
But isn't that already
Sure,
in
but
place for
that's-
Vox now?
That's like down into the weeds of governance. We still have a lot of bigger picture.
So is the action basically we need a proposal for how we want to change?
So from
Like
the,
how does
so,
like what is the proposal for
so from the
making
plumbing
a
doc,
summer release?
this was something that really stuck folks, so that's why I wanted to sort of like bring that up here.
I mean, I can tell that it's sticking, folks, but it's also like something we're going to be talking about for probably another 2 weeks.
Can
So if we try to do it all today, we won't be able to talk about anything else.
Okay.
So are there things, let's like move from like modules to like core like Puppet itself, so this is like Puppet DB, Factory, like those type of things. Again, we talked about like the enhancement proposals, so if you're gonna change things, it has to go through that. I don't know, what do folks think about what it means to have an enhancement on like core Puppet and the time around that?
I think that's much more important than this.
Does it make sense for us to, instead of trying to dig into individual items, to dig into what is the list of items that we need to actually create government document on?
Yeah, more
And
like-
then we can offline that
So so if you look at the pull request, this is where a lot of people get like tripped up of like, well, what type of change do we need to vote on? What type of things require the committee to give their input? And so does doing a small pull request require a committee to give input? It sounds like from us, no, we just need some money.
What is the list of items that we need to discuss that sort of stuff on? And so we can actually know all of the things that we need to work through, rather than trying to work through them individually as someone brainwaves them in this room. Does that make sense to people, or am I just barking up the answer?
I agree, and I also would really like to figure out how we handle product management things and how we handle engineering technical things, and what the framework for that is. Those are different decisions.
I'm actually
Right, we're like the product management thing would be more like, hey, we need to build a thing, because this is what people are asking for. Where the engineering half would be, oh, here's one technical way we can build that. Here's another technical implementation. We put these two together to get that feature or something.
So one way we can do that is through the enhancement proposals, where folks make a proposal and like write it and say, hey, this is what I'd like to do, and solicit feedback from the community. Again, that's what Python does. That's what Django does. That's what Puppet did, at least in the past with like Henrik.
For some of it.
Yeah.
I was obviously going to ask also about some higher level things, like the PMC, obviously the organization is growing. Is the role of the PMC going to change as well? What kind of responsibilities do we have? I think that's the higher level things we should be talking about. I think this, I agree, this is too much into detail, and I love details, but maybe Benny's right, and we should talk about bigger picture things.
I think one thing that we need to keep in mind for modules is it's very cheap to revert a change and to delete a release. Like it makes sense to make it right, but if we make mistakes for modules that merge something by mistake or release it by mistake, it's very easy for us to undo it. It doesn't cost a lot of time, and it doesn't require a lot of knowledge. Whereas if we break something within the Puppet server or the Puppet DB, reverting a package and releasing those again is way more complex and takes more time. So I think it's important to focus on the new components of OpenVox and how we handle changes in this ecosystem.
I'll move on to the next bit here then.
Module, it's not such a problem when being on its own box stage.
Yeah.
So the impact is much bigger. Yes.
Yeah. So the next part was having ensuring we have at least like 5 people on like the core committee, which is like PMC now. Also brought up, if you look at like the plumbing, having like more subcommittees. So having things like a module committee, which basically does what Vox Populi does now. It manages the modules, the linters, text editor plugins, like stuff like that. having a security committee, as like Gene said in the last room, like I think having like one person's not going to be tenable there. Having a language committee, which we kind of already discussed over there about what that would be. So
What were the groups? Core modules?
a module committee. Yeah.
It's the same one you laid out in your document, right?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure.
Yep. A security community committee. Excuse me. Language, which we spoke about. I wrote one as like ecosystem, but that's like for like Puppet itself. So folks that are
Ecosystem architecture.
Specifically like Puppet, PuppetDB, Factorbolt, that software that we're now like taking on. And from like a governance perspective there, my thoughts were to have, we've got like that core group, which we call like PMC today, that can act as like arbitration for the other like subcommittees. And so we get like the folks that are maybe interested in packaging Puppet and Bolt and keeping that stuff going aren't necessarily going to be the same folks that are all about like managing modules, right? Or
So you're saying that the PMC is kind of coordinates all of these?
They're the arbiters of these, yeah.
What do you define as an arbiter in this case?
If the subcommittee can't like come to a consensus, then they would go to the PMC.
But if they do reach
right now,
consensus.
but later on, events and marketing.
Yeah, as like a separate subcommittee.
Yeah, actually, events is probably something that's needed sooner rather than later, because it should be the group that's setting up, say, this.
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
year.
That's great.
Would that also cover PR? So just to,
I was just about to say, I think the PR side would be wrapped up in the same group as events because there's so much interdependency on that.
I both agree and disagree at the same time, because the sorts of people who want to be doing the events may not be people who are good at PR.
You've got a very valid
Which is fine.
yeah, very valid point there.
So my thoughts on like composition here is that someone from the PMC likely would be in each of these, but other people could be in these that aren't in the PMC. And so like we do elections now to be in that like core group, but you could also just be offering to say, I don't care about all that, but I am interested in like modules or building like Puppet or something, and to be on those like subcommittees.
I know you put it in the doc, but I don't remember. Were these, was the proposal to have these elected or like nominated?
It could go either way, really. I think like somebody from PMC should be in each to help, but even that's not like necessary. These could just be like nominated by the PMC. What do folks think?
When I was in the university, we also had an organization with different committees, and there was a board, and everyone on the board sort of had a responsibility to look at the group, the committees. They weren't sort of part of the execution, but rather they were connected to it. They knew the health of the committee, how it was going. So maybe that's more of a model that every member of the PMC has a responsibility to take care of a committee. Not necessarily act in it, be part of it, but rather, overlooking it, maybe also point of contact.
I guess I wonder, do we actually need at all to worry about, to like elect people to these committees, or can they just really ad hoc form? And the PMC's role is to make sure that no specific organization becomes too powerful in each of the committees.
I think the PMC being elected would cover the needs there, so long as they keep an eye on what's going on in the committees. And other than that, that can come and go based on interest and time availability.
Yeah.
It simplifies the process really a lot.
I like the idea of self-managing committees, that they themselves decide who's in there and who isn't.
I would be though not, I wouldn't mandate it by any means, but I would be very strongly in favor of the PMC nominating basically a chair for each committee.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get.
I'm kind of like negative on chairs just because it adds like too many like layers of things.
Call it a coordinator, I mean, I don't know that they have
Coordinator,
any
yeah.
sort of power, they're just like,
The wrangler of the people
Yeah.
in that.
yeah.
Well, if we have one person from the PMC in each of these, then like we like have that by default.
If
Yeah,
they're
but that's
actively
good.
engaged.
Yeah.
Finding that and writing that down, I think that is governance that we need to do now. So it's explicit. Whenever you look outside, from outside approximately, you know how we govern ourselves.
Exactly. Yep.
How is consensus defined? Do we require unanimously everyone to agree? Is it like voting? How do if each group wants to do something? How do we like if one person does not agree? Do we say it's a majority vote or?
How do
If
you-
it just doesn't grow naturally? How do we
resolve conflict?
Yeah.
I think that like ties into this, right? So let's say this turns into something that's identified as like not consensus, right? Like we're not sure if we should like merge it or not. Then I think the committee over like modules would then like weigh in and figure it out amongst themselves. And if for some reason they couldn't, then the PMC would arbitrate.
What is the task of the PMC besides the tasks that are already in these subgroups?
They're responsible. Sorry, I don't have this docs like right up.
No, because I asked because if you are elected to the PMC, and this is also then saying you are the head of one of these subgroups, and you don't want to have more work to do in the PMC, being in two organizational things, you know. So either the PMC is just you are PMC and have the task of the PMC, or you are head of security language or whatever.
Why? I think you can be in the PMC and also be in like one of those or not.
It's a question of how to do it.
I think if someone on the PMC wants to be actively involved in the head of one of the committees, there should be nothing preventing that. But I don't know that mandating that the PMC is the only one that is coordinating and running each of these groups, unless we expand PMC to a larger number of people, is really practical because, as far as I know, the entire PMC does this is volunteer time, and that's now asking them to do two things instead of one, to take up the limited amount of time that they have.
I definitely think it like needs to grow so we have more transparency and so we have the ability for folks to be able to do things like not just modules, but all the other things we're taking on.
Maybe undesirable that the PMC member is actively involved, because if you need to arbitrate and you're also part of the discussion, you need to arbitrate yourself. So that's why I think more PMC should be a point of contact, and not too involved.
Normally, the PMC would get involved if the rest of the community is failing to reach like a consensus on an issue on the way forward or something.
I mean, they could also just step down in terms of like if they're arbitrating something from that they're on.
Yeah.
But like realistically, like I could see, I could see Tim being on the PMC since he is today, and maybe being interested in like modules because now that's like a separate responsibility, right? But maybe not packaging Puppet itself, right? And somebody else is over there.
In the past,
Just
it
to be
was
practical.
challenging to get enough people being interested in a PMC seat. So I think it makes sense to not add more work to PMC people because it probably scares more people away. So in the past like 2 or 3 years we got more than 5 nominations, so we had an actual election, but it wasn't always the case. I think if some of the PMC people want to be part of those committees, that's totally fine, but it shouldn't be required.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that was why I specifically was saying something like a coordination person, because I see these community, like sub-communities, committees, whatever we want to call them, is going to need someone who's like, the meetings are here, here's where they're going to be held, like, there's an organizational aspect to each of these that needs someone who's going to be sort of just maintaining that. They don't need to have any additional power. All they are is organizational to that committee.
Especially not kind of give everyone the tools to do it themselves, like a kind of anarchy way, so you don't have a single person responsible, because responsibility creates sucks and creates like a feeling of drag and whatever.
Yeah.
So if we like I think the Oxford is like the document with you need to do these things to do this and this. If every team can do that, then I think it's fine, and then you just need a mailing list and like a channel, Slack channel.
Yeah, I mean, if there's multiple people on like each of the committees, then you're not necessarily being that drag, right? So like, if say my pull request doesn't get consensus and it does need to go in front of folks and get like input and everything, you know, if not everybody's there, there's a handful of people and they can figure it out.
Yeah.
Quick question, because I'm trying to make some notes and put them somewhere. Which GitHub project should I create an issue recording some of the stuff in these days?
Plumbing.
Plumbing under Vox Public, because I mean we've got OpenVox project, right, fine.
Yep. There's like a PR there with the discussion.
That's the only PR on the repo.
Yeah, it's the only PR.
Okay, I was creating an issue. Right. Fair enough.
If you're taking notes, just make a Wikipedia page on there.
I was just ready to hit create. The button's there.
There you go.
Go to the wiki and Control A.
Okay, yeah. Right, wiki.
Well, actually, there is another thing I'm thinking of. All these subcommittees now are dedicated to Vox Populi, besides the language one. The language one is something we have together with Perforce.
Yes.
I think it shouldn't be on the same list, it should be a little bit apart, because we are dedicating someone into the language committee. And the language committee itself, as far as I understand now, is not part of Vox Populi, it's something else, it's
Well, there's
part in between.
there's a representative from Vox, but before we talked about there being multiple representatives from each place. But I think from the last meeting, folks were happy with one person from Vox.
Were you saying that there would be the language committee and then also a language group? Okay, yeah. I would also argue that the security one is not the same, because it's going to have ties. Like this group is going to have ties to Perforce, to OpenSSL, to other projects.
To the modules.
Yeah, and it's going to. What's that?
I think it's just another like subcommittee of people that are gonna.
But it's also it is also elevated a little bit, because like literally, if we get funding, we're hiring people to do this job, right?
And I think security from a structural point of view fits in here fine, because the people that are involved in that grouping are all Vox people. The difference in language is it's not composed of this community solely. That was still composed of this community, even though it talks to a lot of other people.
Okay.
Like you had an infrastructure here, which I think is interesting.
That's James.
So like currently, the PMC, which would be their like modules now, is like they like handle their own infrastructure, and so things
currently
like
the PMC handles all of that.
Yeah. But like things like module sync and stuff like that is really under the purview of the people that care about modules. And same as like I think the infrastructure for like building Puppet and Bolton things is going to be under the purview of people that are like building that. Like I don't think there needs to be a separate infrastructure like subcommittee.
I'm going to disagree with that, having done this at Puppet. The work of the infrastructure people should be very small, but one of the key things it needs to do is make an active point of working through all the different groups to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts in different ways and that we have the infrastructure that we need. The day-to-day work of like running it, for the most part, is going to go to the separate areas you're talking about. But that, even if it's just a couple of people, having a designated point of contact for all things infrastructure I have found come in very, very handy and to be really, really a pain in the ass when it's not there.
Hey, my
It's not been on both sides of it.
The infrastructure group is the hey, my CI isn't working. You know, like, these are the people who would be like, know the system really well and go and fix it.
Or triage and send it to somebody else.
Right, yeah.
But those are gonna be different people, right? Because the type of CI we use for modules is different from this type of CI we use.
Sounding much less likely right now. It sounded like a lot of it's like some of it's GitHub runners, but if we're running the GitHub runners on, say, a Kubernetes cluster, and we're using the same Kubernetes cluster with Kuber for CI, like almost all of it could be going through the same thing.
I don't think any of these groups have to be permanent or static other than security anyways. In my head from this discussion, what these really sound like is what in a lot of Linux projects we call SIGs, special interest groups. SIGs come and go as needed. In this infancy time, we damn sure need an infrastructure SIG. Now, we may find in 6 months that there's nothing for that SIG to do anymore, and that all the work has been absorbed in the others, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just my take on it. I'm literally one person in the room here that happens to talk loudly, but like, that's how I'm seeing it. Like, I don't think we need to get bent out of shape if something is needed now but isn't needed later. It's not like we're trying to restructure the PMC here, especially since we're saying these groups don't have much of any power. They're just here to coordinate the work and get it done.
They are in charge of their areas.
It's a way of organizing people to give different sets of tasks done, and some people will be in many of these.
How split up to the people need like get someone who
Sorry, can you speak up?
Do people need to be split up in groups? Like, can you work in multiple groups, or is that, do we see that as an issue?
I would expect many people to work in many groups.
I think if you're able and interested, that's good, and that's like part of it diverging from the PMC where there's just like 5 folks that are like doing everything. Like that's not scalable, and so yeah, having folks that maybe just want to be in like one of these, right?
So then maybe the question is, how do you join a group like that? What's the model on that? And I have some ideas.
So like one way is elections, another is like nominations from the PMC, and they like specify people. I mean, like, what do you think?
Like volunteering? Yeah, well, I think on you like the SIG model, I think many SIGs have their own policies on how to join. I think the infrastructure probably should be stricter than the modules group, because infrastructure has a lot of secrets, it has a lot more authority, so it probably should be stricter. Security is probably also one of those, like Ben said, special. People might even be paid for it. So that's, I think every committee, SIG, how we want to call it, needs to come up with their own, well, basically governance. How you join it, what do you need to do?
I think I might actually lower some docs on that. If we can come back to that in a couple of minutes, might have something more that would help us answer that if there's other things to talk about.
Yeah.
I think I remember reading about how some of these SIGs were structured and governed and how organizing SIGs might be very recently.
I will say I'm definitely pro it not being the PMC's role to either have elections or nominations. I don't know that that's something that we should be dumping on the PMC to like manage people into these groups. If we can self-manage the groups, at least to start with, I think that's better. Obviously, this should all be a living document, and next year when we're sitting in this room, if we go, man, that did not go well, we should really think about this again, we'll be in this room and we can have this conversation again.
I like the idea of kind of SIGs making up their own idea, their own ways, but also the idea that SIGs creates in the form. Like, speaking for myself, let's say I want to make a SIG orchestration, seeing how we can build stuff and having more involved before we are performing whatever, that's our business, but it's under the option of my brand, and it's a place where the community can see stuff that's happening and get involved as they wish or not, keep it simple. And if it doesn't work out, we can always go switch it, but you don't have to start.
I think there's a difference though between being like a contributor and like being on like one of these like committees. So like we want to encourage there to be tons of like contributors, but there needs to be a committee of folks that are like dedicated, that are gonna like be there to like create consensus, to like bring us through. And that's where I don't think they should be self-organized, because we don't want people dropping in and out. We do want people to make a commitment for some time period to say,
I think there's early days
I care.
like speaking about, let's say, the hypothetical situation. There's early days, we're just figuring out what's possible, we're discovering new communities, we're seeing who's interested, what's going on, what ideas are open, etc. And as you move towards figuring out, start doing stuff, or more standardization, or more society, is this the thing I'm watching the whole time further? And then you mature further, there's going to be a national direction of this thing. Obviously security, infrastructure, etc. That's a whole thing. But and module, sure. But events doesn't have to start putting formalized day one.
yeah. Like my goal here though is that things are very transparent, because like if there's not consensus in a pull request, and which like there's often not, then like it's gonna go to like this committee to like figure out. And I just want that to be transparent to everyone. This is how we got there. We like followed a process, and so that people know it's not because this company has so many like seats at the table and you don't,
And will be there limits for the people at PMC?
Yeah, that's
the PMC does have it's an annual election, so there's not a term limit per se. You can get reelected if people still believe in you.
Really? Well, that's good to know.
If there were term limits, we'd be fucked.
So what I was hunting for earlier is the Fedora project's documentation on creating a SIG. And basically, it's for them, because they've got multiple mailing lists, it's post to one or more mailing lists to see if there's interest. If there is, create a wiki page and use some of the existing ones as some guidance. Request any additional resources you need, which in this case I would assume would mean working with the PMC to get access to something that group would need that they can't self-provide, and then get shit done. And at least as a first pass, that seems like a reasonable starting point to me for us to learn from. Gotcha.
I think at the moment the PMC makes an outside collaborator to a contributor. Like we are the PMC invites people to the GitHub organization, and we have different kinds of validation. Like sometimes we know the people in person, sometimes they are long time contributors. But I think as soon as we marked someone as trustworthy and invited them into the GitHub organization, the communities or special interest groups should have the ability to form themselves. Like we trusted them once to come into the organization, and afterwards the people should be able to just create a SIG if that's required.
But that's like
assuming that we don't have a SIG that gets formed with all of one company. If it does end up being a problem, the other people in that SIG will reach out to the PMC and say, hey, we have a problem here.
But that's like a Venn diagram, because like, sorry.
It's not take any random SIG who wants to have one. Someone will decide, is this SIG appropriate for box or whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, this list that was set is a really good starting point, but I probably, with all the information, it sounds like it would be more useful to be a dynamic list based on the SIGs. So you just have a page of which SIGs exist, and probably want to start with the list you have there, but less strict than the one is in the pull request now, where it describes each one. So has this as a starting point, try to get it all going, and then see, as Gene said, maybe infrastructure won't be doing the job after so much time anymore and just disappear. And so have it as a dynamic list more
I particularly like that because it lets us kind of figure out what we don't know yet as a community. Like even if we're piggybacking off of Puppet, we can't assume we're going to be the exact same thing. I think a lot of us probably hope there's some differences. So I think this gives us the opportunity to learn, right?
There's like language in here that's basically the subcommittees can like come and go based on like the PMC.
And the documentation from Fedora is, I just skimmed through it really fast. It's not long and it sounds like a very great starting point.
But each of these groups has knowledge about that specific spot, and so they also have the responsibility of making people contributors and giving them like merge access. I do think there's like a difference between being in like modules versus like building Puppet and like those abilities and who should have
Does that knowledge need to be vetted?
Yeah.
Contributions.
And also, all the people in the SIG don't need to have the ability to give access to another member, because that's also described as get the resources you need. We are the SIG group for this, and we need access for this member to the GitHub repo at that level.
Well,
we can ask the PMC for that.
Keep in mind that we said earlier that we're going to manage those things through Tofu.
Yeah.
And so we're right now, that's, let me reach out to Tim and see if he can grant me some access.
And that's what I want to like move away from is,
Right.
is by having like if you're in this like type of area, those folks know and they can give you the access because they know who should have it based on their
with different roles
contributions.
that we can configure in GitHub, we can do that, but like the vetting or revoking or whatever of that can all be done through peer review, through pull requests to the Tofu repository to grant or remove the access as needed.
I see that like technically, but I'm saying the PMC shouldn't have to like deal with that. Like the folks in the individual spots should be able to
That
say.
would go back to where that coordinator
like,
person comes in. They can
makes sense.
delegate somebody in that particular SIG who is then authorized to bring other people in.
Well, the committee itself would have that power to say, hey, we're the ones that who present it out.
I think we're getting into like implementation details here.
I would point out though, don't run for the PMC just because you think that's a way of getting commit access and admin, because it's just not about that. There have always been people outside of the PMC who've been given that access.
Oh yeah.
It's like 200 plus now.
No, 200 don't have admin access, but it's not like the 5 of us or something. There are other people, and that will remain to be the case. Yeah, I mean it's not like loads, clearly, but yeah, just want to make sure nobody confuses.
It seems like in a lot of cases, the solution here is not to worry about like creating strict membership to these. It's about documentation of who's at each of the meetings, both who they are and what organization they are representing. And if we are documenting meetings in a way that ensures transparency, it doesn't matter who shows up on the day, as long as you get a quorum. And we can define that outside of this meeting. I don't know that that's really a core thing we need to discuss, but that gets us a picture of who was there, a picture of what was done and what was decided. And then we don't have to worry, we're not playing the strict admittance game, we're playing the lazy consensus game, which is what Vox has always been about.
You basically describe the lower bound instead of the upper bound.
Yes.
So 10 people show up, and 4 from one company and 4 from another, and 2 are just like random and got involved.
It's
And so
documented, the PMC should get a copy of it, and the PMC can make a decision as to whether or not they feel that that's appropriate or not.
but we could take that off of the PMC by just having a committee where we know who's on the committee and they can just be responsible for their things.
Yeah, but I think in the end, PMC is the final responsible organization. So if there's any bigger issue or conflict, PMC in the end is not still responsible.
Yep.
But I agree there's some authority within the companies themselves to self-arrange, self-govern.
One thing I think we can definitely do better is before we start a chat like this, get somebody taking minutes. Because I hope you realise halfway, I'm trying now, but we should have started off with that. And it's
And that's why I put the camera in the corner.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's documentation of everything that anyone says, and if someone wants to go make minutes afterwards, including throwing it in an AI program, that's their problem and not mine. I won't be the one doing it because I don't believe in AI.
You're gonna transcribe it on language.
I mean, I might throw it at a non-generative, like, you know, speech-to-text program, but that's a different story. And I killed the room.
You missed AI.
I can just stop typing frantically now, and I can just give you a link to what I've written down so far.
Like, I don't want
And people can
to
correct it.
monopolize things, but in terms of this, like, builds up through like the governance, because the whole reason we have governance is because not all change is like equal, and like we have to have discussions. What do folks think about enhancements not for modules, but to like core like Puppet, Bull, PuppetDB, Factor? What do folks think about that? Do folks like the idea of the enhancement proposals that like Python and Django uses? Those are good.
It makes sense. It just needs to be cautious rather than to delay a enhancement just to be sure that it's worthwhile to put it to bump the version and be conservative in just moving fast and break things. That would be my only concern. I'm expressing myself correctly, I hope.
I'm not concerned. I'm not understanding which of those you're concerned
Which
about.
direction are you worried about?
I'm worried that when a enhancement is pushed too eagerly and pushed too fast, that after a while people start complaining, hey, this breaks this, that. And my only concern would be that whenever something is pushed into the core of the components, that it would be done cautiously.
I agree, because you can add features and then realize you build a bunch of features that nobody like uses, and now we have to maintain.
Exactly.
So like I'm also for cautiousness there. What do we think's like the right way to approach enhancements with Puppet itself?
Well, I mean, if it's a break like language change, then it needs to go through that language steering committee. If it's just like if it's some sort of a enhancement, like making something faster, adding a new OS, stuff like that, then I don't see why it would get treated any differently than anything else with modules.
I agree with that.
Do we specifically like want to call out just like packaging of new operating systems? Because that comes up a lot both in like modules and I would think with Puppet.
Maybe we could say that everything that introduces new behavior or changes existing behavior requires a proposal of whatever format, because those kind of changes have the potential to increase your CPU time or the potential of breaking changes or something like this. And other enhancements like new operating system really should be a no-brainer.
I think in my experience also within the forum community, we sometimes had the APR that then grew into a proposal because while doing it you realize, oh wait, this is actually way bigger than we thought, this needs a proposal. So it shouldn't be strict, you start with the proposal and then APR. Sometimes you then realize, this is bigger, we escalate it to a proposal.
That also easily helps onboarding new contributors that are like, hey, I'll quickly PR this one, wait, I'll help you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're writing in your Puppet,
yeah.
If it's like going into like the core Puppet components, I think that's like less cautious. Like, why not start with a discussion before starting with code?
Because again, you want to be able to take drive-by contributions.
Yeah, because
you can't expect those people to go look at all your documentation and figure out the right way to submit a change proposal.
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the role, responsibility of a maintainer of a project to also guide new contributors in the right way, and that takes effort and time. I know it's not great, but I think it's the only way to sort of grow your community. If you force through too strict proposal, too strict processes, people will just go away and not care.
And I think that's what Perforce is like suffering or suffered in the past. Like it was very, very strict, and for us as an outside collaborator, it was very, very challenging to get stuff into the repositories owned by Perforce. And I made a lot of presentations about Vox Populi, and one of the big benefits is that it's usually quite easy to get your stuff merged because there are quite strict processes that take like ages to review. Of course, now with the OpenVox project, we should be more cautious and try to figure out.
I'm not sure you should start. I think I would disagree. I understand what you're saying, but I think you should give the opportunity for your community to grow as large as you can first.
Yes.
And I think you should encourage those opinions. I understand the hesitation. I understand no one here wants broken infrastructure, but you don't want a lack of community either.
Yes.
I will point out, like I have said many times, 96% of Puppet's paid customers are running Vox Populi modules. And if they didn't trust that process, they wouldn't do that.
I completely agree. I mean, Vox Populi is everything in the Puppet ecosystem for content across everywhere I ever worked. So I mean, it would be crazy to try and limit how much of that there is.
And even for like OpenVox, Puppet, whatever stuff, Puppet leaving the server, who actually blindly just upgrades and it's like, wait, this will work. Everyone tests this stuff before.
And let's be honest, Puppet has never released a broken package.
Well, things also get in here. I think there is an issue of things getting here too quickly.
Yes, we need to.
Like I got RuboCop testing in there on accident, but I didn't want to be, and now I've been fighting with it ever since.
I am totally okay with the development process moving quickly and following the same process. The feature list, though, what do we build next? Where do we go next? That has to be a little bit more controlled.
I think it would be
that's the same thing that we do with the PMC, though. If there's a big change, we talk about it.
I think what Steven's saying is you get drive-by PRs and somebody's like, hey, I want to contribute this thing, and that might not be on your radar for you want to take things, but it's on theirs, and they sent you a PR, so what do you do then?
I think
that's when the PMC talks about it.
The way that I would think about this is whatever rules you set up, you always want someone to be able to do something simple like drive-by PR to fix documentation.
Yes.
Don't ever make that hard. I learned that lesson the hard way, and it will kill the community.
It's an exciting problem to have if we're talking about core Puppet OpenVox changes, there being too many and them coming in too fast. I mean, we should really be delighted if that's a problem.
do we want to time gate these? So if somebody is sending a thing, that we want to give it enough time that the committee can look at it, or it has to get this one has to get a +2 or +3 or something. Or
I think there are going to be loads of people who are going to be really interested in looking at those PRs. I don't think it'll be like the modules where there are just thousands and thousands. I think it's probably not going to be a problem for us to
It's not really
hey,
a
look
problem.
guys, we've got a new.
All PRs are always first reviewed by Pascal anyway.
Right.
He's the first to react.
The second thing is also if PR, it's not as if as the moment the PR is merged, a new release is made, or is that intention? Because even drive-by PRs, we can look at them.
We don't do continuous releases, and I don't think that we're going to do that. That if we did, that would be a thing to go through the entire process.
Some module changes act a bit like that. I know it's not automatic, but
somebody always makes a decision to make a release.
Well, who makes the release decision? That's going to be on the subcommittee for OpenVox to say when we do releases.
But it is very common for a single module change to result in a release a couple of days later.
Mixed.
No, separate. Yeah.
But I think OpenVox is I
think that's a very, very different thing. Like if there's a module that hasn't been touched in 2 years, and someone says, "Hey, here's a PR to update it so it works on current Ruby," and there's nothing else in the queue, of course we're going to make a new release for it. That's never going to happen with OpenVox.
I think the one thing I'm wondering about is, let's say we have a new contributor who joins the project. What's the experience going to be like? Because today you're added to this group where you get access to all the modules.
And a lot of notifications.
And that, exactly, you get an overload of notifications, and the more boxes we add, the worse it's going to get. I would actually argue that even though it's very nice to be welcoming, we're at the point where we're so big that it's actually a downside, people turn away from it. So maybe we need to separate more into smaller permissions, just to avoid the whole notification overload.
Like smaller orgs or smaller permission levels or both?
I think probably more the latter. We already like doing a bit with, for example, Beaker is a separate group, you don't get access to Beaker directly, only if you start being interested in it. So I would like to encourage, and I need to leave in a minute to my training, so I'm just going to drop this with you. But sort of, we should figure out the process, how you get into those groups if you're interested. But initially when you join, you just focus on like my company uses this module, this is what I want to contribute to, and I don't really care about the rest, and then from there you can grow and get more involved. I think that's some trade-off we can find with overload versus being very narrow.
Is there any mileage in having modules in a separate org, or is that just
you
more
can also define different
happening?
teams. I mean, you have teams.
Yeah,
I mean, there's ways.
There are other ways of doing it.
I did post there's an issue where I opened a discussion I opened with my idea about this that you can probably also revisit. So I think that's one issue that I think we as governments will also need to think about.
With OpenVox, since we're not doing a release for like PR, it sounds like we're gonna have a different release like process. What other projects have is they will have contributor access, and they will have then people that have release access. And so do we want to have that separation, at least for, I don't think we need it for modules, but at least for like OpenVox?
Yeah, I would say that we do like the PEP process that you're talking about, and then I don't know if it's a PMC or somebody else, kind of like collects those into like a roadmap with milestones, and it, like we hit this milestone, these PEPs have been closed. That's when we make a release.
And I think release access is something that fits in the right-hand side of the board, like you have an ecosystem architecture people group that then can say, wait, this is actually fine for a releaser, and they can think of this is a batch, this is a minor, this is a major.
And that's the checkpoint anyways for the releases, right? Like for the OpenVox and the server packages, the ecosystem team is almost for sure going to, that committee is going to have to talk before a release happens anyways. Right?
Yeah, like, I don't think that we want to try to get back to like coordinated releases, because that's just
I'm not trying to
madness.
say coordinated,
But everybody
I'm just
needs,
saying,
they
like,
all need to talk.
I'm
They
just
need to
saying that
know.
like that team goes, okay, we have a set of things that make sense to release. We should schedule a release.
Yeah.
Rather than it be a +1 +2 thing, because we're not expecting to release the core pieces every week or something. Like if the modules hit some, like if someone makes a couple of changes and there's a reason to release a module, the module should just get released and we should move on with our lives. But the core should be a little bit more like conservative, just simply from the I have to go update my entire fleet like server by server with an RPM or a dev, right?
With the exception that if we have a CVE worth
Security is security. I'm not saying don't patch that immediately. I'm saying like
proper release notes are much
enhancement
more
side.
important.
So does the OpenVox like subcommittee then need to do this on like a time-based thing where they say before a release we're gonna wait so long, or do we want it to be a unanimous thing? We're like good for a release. Like what's that mechanism?
By requiring it to have proper release notes, there's already some time built in.
But do we want to say we want unanimous of the subcommittee before we like do a release, or like what's that mechanism?
Are we going to push out betas or anything?
Oh, yeah, what?
Is there any plan to put out beta releases before we do an actual release, or release candidates?
I don't think that we have to decide that today. I would prefer to do pre-releases. We could even do nightlies.
Nightlies, yeah.
My opinion is that we just automate nightlies and just have them always up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I posted in the Slack earlier this week, versioning stuff so that we can do nightlies that, like you can update the version to the next version, quote unquote, and the nightlies will either be below or above that depending on how you put the letters in. And I put all that documentation on Slack so that it's available to people. Also, we should not call them PEPs just simply because you're going to say PEP and everyone's going to go, Python? Just putting it out there because it's on the board and people have said the letters, we should definitely not call it PEP.
I mean,
It might be VEPs.
Or just call it Vox.
Yeah, well, enterprise proposals or whatever. Enhancement.
Since we are releasing on our own release numbers, will not be the same as a pair force. Is this also true for the major release number?
I think for the language compatibility, that we're going to need to stay.
Yeah.
And any breaking change that would affect the ecosystem as a whole, because modules are also bound on major versions. And so I think that one we would need to stay coordinated on personally.
Well, I think we're not going to, I think that we're going to add to the metadata so that there is a Puppet requirement, there's a box requirement, so they don't have to stay in alignment. But as far as numbers, because we can do a break and release it as like, you know, Ruby or whatever. That's not really language. I guess that is kind of language. But
We can version the language.
We say implement language version X, implement language version Y.
Yeah, the models is like only language level 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate to be the person who says we should break our versioning scheme entirely, but does it make sense for us to add a fourth digit?
No.
No.
Where the first digit is the language version, and that stays the same between the two, and then we do major minor release.
No.
Please.
I will find anybody on anything that's not Simvert. I have dealt with too many projects that are not Simvert, and it's just not working.
I mean, let me be clear. I'm saying it's Semver. It's still Semver. It's just that we've added in front of it.
So you're saying like language dot major dot
yes.
minor.
So it's still Semver on the last three. It's just that the first digit is literally just this is the language.
First parties start freaking out.
Yeah.
If you change the language version, you have changed functionality, which is a breaking change, which is a major version.
I just see the other way as being really ugly from a like how do you manage that metadata.
Well, let's just say that we're going to make a language requirement, and we'll figure out the implementation detail later.
We were talking about a second ago time-based or not on OpenVox releases. The only thing I wanted to add to that is one thing that was learned at Puppet is that companies actually get upset if you release too often, and because it causes too much churn within their systems. And so there is something to be said for making sure that we are not popping out new versions constantly, other than the nightlies or security updates, of course. Just food for thought as we're thinking about that stuff.
So, can I ask you, I know you don't speak on behalf of Perforce today, but when you were there, did that greatly outweigh the opposite of that?
Yes.
The people begging you for stuff?
It did.
Okay. If you had to ballpark, like, how that was weighted, what would you say it was?
That was outside of my purview, but I know that the thing that bubbled up enough was that too many releases was enough to cause entire process changes within the company. And Ben might have more insight on that than I do, but yeah.
So
I know on the product side, it was significant enough that it quickly changed how things were done inside the entire product organization.
Okay.
I agree, it needs to be a balance. You know, companies work for organisations where they've got internal change records to raise and risk assessments and 8 different people to review and sign off on stuff.
Definitely.
Likewise, you don't want something so infrequent that the change is super
Right.
risky each time, but
Just
Yeah, it's finding the
I
right
never run the
balance,
latest.
but, you know, just making sure that we don't get a little too vigorous because we don't have corporate control is all
And
all I'm suggesting.
As long as we maintain December,
Yeah.
not sure it matters that much.
And I'm not sure that it does either, it's just, it's a food for thought is all I was getting at.
So if you put out like 50 patch releases over the course of 6 months, but you didn't have like a Y release until like once every 6 months, that would freak people out?
I don't think that would.
Okay.
I
I'm
don't
just trying to
think
get some
that's-
details.
That's,
That's all.
that's the kind of thing I understood. I was like, yeah, who's caring about like 50 patch version?
Yeah.
I think the key is in the feature releases and the major releases.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's the one because feature releases, unless you've got a bug in your system that a patch is fixing, feature releases are what most people are going to look at for, I want to upgrade.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, most of us don't pin the latest.
Right, if you're going for patch releases because you had a bug, and you're like,
Right.
I need that right now kind of thing, and you'll do the rest of the upgrade later.
But where people want to stay current on the feature releases, or especially on the major versions,
Yeah.
and they've got change review processes and quite literally hundreds of thousands of servers,
Sure.
it causes a lot of strife, is what I understood the question, the problem to be.
Okay.
I
Also,
wasn't.
I do think that a lot of this is implementation. We can.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to go into
I
deep.
mean, it's 4:15.
Food
I
for
just want
thought.
to make sure
Yeah.
that we're.
Oh Lord, I didn't realize that.
And I think certainly a server though, like having release candidates would be really useful, so that a number of people could do like catalog gifts using their actual infrastructure and report back. So if the expectation is nothing's changed because you know we just got some random security stuff or whatever, then it'd be great if some people.
And we can also
confirm
use
that.
nightlies in our backup pipelines for the modules if you want to.
Yeah, but
We did
it's
that.
handy if you've got some people with like 2,000 nodes and
Yeah, sure.
60 roles or
We
whatever
could do
to
that,
actually run up.
Yeah, I at my company we definitely do run release candidates and like development and test boxes and just like already have a ship structure. Kill the move by video.
Sorry.
Hello.
Okay, that's
Alright, so what's next? Do you have an understanding of how the PMC is going to evolve? I'm looking at you because you were going to implement a large number amount of this.
Well, let's see how the next elections go, but probably.
How many people do we want on the PMC? And how many people? So that was like part of the proposal was like setting there's like a minimum number for the subcommittees. I think it was like 3, so there'd be like an odd number at least in each one. And then for the PMC, like what do we want there? Do folks think we should have like a minimum in the subcommittees? Like my deal is we had at least 3 people in each
I think
one.
we need a minimum number to actually form it, but I don't think we need to define that to be able to do the PMC.
Well, and how many folks should we have in the PMC?
I don't think that the 5 people that we had in the past was a problematic number. I think that worked out good. From time to time we have to do some kind of online meetings, and figuring out proper time slot with more than 5 people gets more and more challenging. And 5 is already a nice odd number, so I think that worked out good, and I don't think that we have to increase the number of people.
I don't think we have to, but if we ask for submissions and we end up getting like 7, and the current PMC actually decides, actually these are all top people we'd like to get involved, I think that would be sort of the role of the current PMC to say, well actually 7's a good number as well.
So what that sounds like to me is we go back to what we were talking about earlier of we've got 3 weeks for submissions. Once there's at least 5 submissions at or after the 3-week mark, if there happens to be a boatload of submissions before I put the election stuff up for the actual voting, coordinate with the PMC to see if we want to keep it at 5 or not. We can hash that out 3 weeks
That
from now.
sounds sensible.
I think we always want it to be an odd number.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
which is why I said 7 is
and so should the governance say 5 or 7? And so there's like a minimum, like we either have one or the other. So based on how many people are active that year.
Mm.
You know, there could be
I
either.
think the government should probably just stick to an odd number.
Well, like, we definitely want like an upper bound because, as Tim was saying, like, we don't want 13 people on it because it just gets there's just like
Yeah,
too many folks to coordinate.
Yeah, that won't work.
Yeah, I
More
don't.
than 7 is too many. I was when the language committee, I was already like, oh, I don't know, there's a lot.
So
I mean, actually, the whole idea of keeping it as an odd number is, it sounds great, but so many times, partway through the year, somebody disappeared anyway, and you end up back on an even number. I would probably not stress too much about it.
It might have happened once or twice.
Everyone gets a buddy. If your buddy disappears, you're gone too.
Yeah.
I mean, or put another way, if we're in a situation where 3 people vote yes for something and 3 people vote no for something, we probably haven't done a very good job in talking to the community about what they actually want.
Tim, would a minimum of 3 on the PMC be
I don't think
practical?
no.
Like, I know you've been around it long enough. I'm not saying you want to shoot for 3, but like, when we're talking about what we define as like the minimum to have a functioning PMC is...
I mean, we had years where there were like only 3 people active out of the 5.
What I was getting at is like the government's document saying a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 7. And we aim for somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But that, what I'm trying to avoid
Three
is
is
like
pretty
we
tight.
shoot ourselves in the foot with our own governance docs because we can't get 4 people to be active that year.
I think you just say quorum is 3. Like,
5 people, quorum is 3.
yes. Because that way you say you're going to elect at least 5, and if we hit 3, at any point during the year, we need to start talking about like what does that mean? Do we need to like have a snap election?
Yeah. Makes sense.
I don't
So
know.
the winner votes, I need 3 votes, yes? The winner vote, I need 3 votes. Then you say quorum is 3.
You mean for a particular issue?
Like 3 PMC people need to.
Not be present.
Need to vote in favor of the thing.
Yeah.
3 in favor of makes it pass.
This is also requiring PMC to be more active than they have been in the past, because with lazy consensus could have technically won with 1 vote if nobody had any opposition to it.
If I can make a suggestion to have a upper bound, no more than 12. Because
We have an upper
those are
bound.
the 12 seats of the High Lords of Terror.
Which is what we should be known as.
Well, he's dead!
Yeah, I mean, I don't see us needing to make fast changes to that bit of the current governance. We've got something written
I think
down.
it
We've got
it's already
so many other things that need updating.
Well, what's quorum for PMC to make decisions? Because there's been time where I think decisions have been made around like holidays and things, and so like we're not gonna know all the holidays around the world, but like what's like a reasonable time frame to say, hey, if we're gonna make a decision on this, we either have to get this many people to be involved, or we have to give it this sort of time frame.
I always try to get an opinion from everybody. Sometimes that's a bit complicated due to holidays or whatever, but then I at least got 3 other people that approved something. With my own vote would be 4, and then it doesn't matter what would be the opinion of the 5th people.
I mean, we're quite sensible. If it's a contentious issue, you know, we're aware that we try and get everybody together first.
So
we always try to talk to
currently don't
everybody.
think we need to like nail
And I
down
think
the.
If it's not about security, we get time.
Yeah, usually.
Well, with like lazy consensus, like Ben was saying, you could just have 1 because other people like didn't vote. So
Yes, but the lazy consensus applies for Vox Populi as a whole, and when there's something, when the community isn't able to reach lazy consensus, then the PMC can step in. And the PMC has 1 additional vote, and we try as a whole PMC to find 1 vote.
Yeah, we don't
when the
invoke the
PMC
lazy consensus. What there's only 1 person at the meeting, therefore they get to just dictate whatever they want 1 month. I
Yes.
don't think that's ever come up.
So when the PMC votes, is there like a minimum amount for like quorum? Do we have to have at least 3 people agree on something?
In the past, I would say we always try to have at least 4 people that voted,
Yeah.
but yeah, we never.
I just want to take that from like what we did in the past was a thing to like, it's in a document and
Yeah.
everyone understands how like decisions.
I mean, I think we're a bit pragmatic. It depends what we're making a decision on. You know, are we going to buy a few T-shirts or something? Is probably not the same as are we going to fork a project or change a license or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean that would be like an important thing. If somebody was suggesting a license change or something, then I don't think we would wait for it. You know, want to do it unless we were all there and we fully felt we'd spoken to everybody we wanted to speak to first.
But then you forced a project recently or something. I mean, what the hell? It's not like that happens.
Totally unrealistic. But in the past, we always try to get a quorum, and I think that worked out. I think we should continue with this and maybe just write it down.
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
And what's that quorum?
Like 3 people that approve something.
Yeah.
I think quorum is the majority.
It's
of
just the
whatever
majority,
the elected
yeah.
number were for that year.
That's what I had in mind.
So,
Or on that meeting for that, I mean, we can always review that next year.
Yeah.
We'll see how this goes. The ones that are present can vote. The majority vote has it. And if that for some occasions does not meet the requirement for that instance, then it can be reviewed or modified.
It can be. I mean, it is probably worth noting that, you know, this isn't the first PMC we've ever had. Vox has been going for however many years, Tim, you've been there each year.
2016 or so? Was the first election, so.
I don't think we've reached the conclusion that the PMC voting process is flawed in some way or something, so I think we can probably...
It worked out well in the past.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it can't be changed in the future, I just, yeah.
It can change what doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't see a major panic over codifying it some more.
Well, like the responsibilities are changing, and I think the need for transparency is like changing for us to have like credibility as a real alternative to like public.
I think the answer is document, don't change. Just document what we're doing, don't change it. If we need to change it, come back to it in 6 to 12 months. I think that's the core of everything that we've said in the last 3 hours is like, for the most part, I think things are going well. Let's document how we are doing things in a way that shows the transparency that we need as a organization that needs to mature from a community of modules to a community running a fairly major project now. And then we move on.
All right. Next.
You want to propose a topic?
Okay. Since this is a natural lull in the conversation, I'd like to throw a grenade in the room and see how everybody reacts. If it's not mine. So I'll go up front so everybody can hear me. So, hi, I'm Stephen Pritchard with Secura. I work on the SIP project, et cetera, et cetera. I came up earlier, the whole idea of moving Vox Populi under the Linux Foundation, and I just wanted to make a little short pitch for that idea. I'm one of the people that keeps pushing on this because just so happens my wife works for the Linux Foundation. She's the one who does all of their certification exams. So she works on the education team. So I've got friends, lots of friends over there. One of the things that I think the LF would bring to this whole project is that they have a lot of experience with forks of large software in very recent memory. So Valkey was a fork of Redis, OpenTofu was a fork of Terraform, OpenBow's a fork of HashiCorp Vault. So they got all that stuff, and then on top of that, the entire CNCF is under the Linux Foundation umbrella. So Kubernetes and the 18 billion things that make up the cloud native space. So I think they bring a lot of experience to the whole thing. But the part that really interests me, because my familial connection to it, is the education side of things. Just so happens that I actually have a lot. I actually have a lot of puppet training that I have developed previously for previous customers, and I have all that stuff and I could donate it. Now, I mean, we could, even without the LF thing, we could very easily find a way to set up. Even without the LF thing, we could definitely find a way to set that stuff up in a way that we could actually deliver that, and have some free training for the community. I'm sure we could figure out something. The LF already has all of that stuff available. They already have ways of running, virtual machines to do training on and that sort of thing. They do provide a lot of that for free. They do pay. They do have a lot of that that's paid, because that's how they fund the whole organization. That's one of their primary funding sources. But anyway, either way, I would be happy to donate a bunch of training material, and I know I'm not the only one who would be willing to donate some training material. I don't want to speak for anybody else who may or may not be in the room right now. Anyway, so I think there's a lot of benefit that can come from that.
What about the legal benefits?
Well, and then the legal benefit is I feel like it's kind of obvious, having it is a 501c6. C6. It's not a charitable organization. But it is a nonprofit. But much the same as corporate, it sounds like. But in addition to handling money and all that kind of stuff, they do have legal. They do have PR. Their entire marketing team. They're the ones that put on KubeCon and Open Source Summit and various other things, right? So they've got an entire huge team for that. So I think there's a lot of the miscellaneous stuff that they would handle for us, and actually even infrastructure. I don't think they would dictate how Vox Populi had to do things, but I do think they would provide some infrastructure.
Just one more note to add to your pitch. Part of joining LF does require vendor sponsors, and I'll just throw my hand up and say Secure will absolutely be one of those if you guys do decide to do that. That is an open-ended offer that doesn't expire anytime, so we are happy. No, but we will become one to do this.
Okay.
Yep.
That would give us reason to.
Like one of the other things for joining, which is some of the impetus for this, is that you need to have already figured out like what your governance model is,
100%.
what it means to be a contributor, who can do what and when, and how decisions are made. And so they expect you to come.
They want you to be organized when you come to them. So I've already had a conversation with the person who's in charge of bringing in projects, and he gave me a bunch of tips, and I shared those on Slack a while back. Yeah, they like I said, they just basically want to make sure you're real, you're organized, and that there's at least one LF member who is willing to sponsor the thing.
Something else that they do is they hold all IP for you, and so you assign that to them, and so that they can legally enforce it, as well as protect it, and then ensure that you don't lose the domain name or lose your access to GitHub or things like that. And so they also help with those things.
Yeah, that's true. They do have that little thing called the Linux kernel that they're also responsible for ultimately. So,
would there be reasons to give preference to a European foundations versus the Linux Foundation, for instance?
If that was a real concern, there is an LF Europe also. I don't know enough details to know how they handle projects and everything.
The reason for asking is that EU is funding the open source project, so we might have direct connection with the EU Commission if we are based in the EU.
But the way I understand it, one of the reasons why there is an LF Europe is that there's you can fund LF Europe, and that goes into kind of a general fund that LF uses for European events and European projects and whatever else, and without having to be, necessarily, the money doesn't just go straight to the U.S. or anything.
The KDE project does a similar thing. KDE just set up a separate legal entity in the U.S. because they have them here in Europe, and they can utilize both of those so that they can receive fundings that are both from governments and tax deductible on both continents.
To add to that, the Eclipse Foundation, I don't see how kind of working. They have the nonprofit in the US, they have the nonprofit in Europe, they have nonprofit basically all over the world, and that gives coverage and also safety in whenever any geopolitical situation might change. Some US departments are being shut down for batshit reasons.
From a tax perspective, just so everyone's aware, both Linux Foundation and Open Collective are 501c6, so they are identically for taxation in the U.S.
Yeah. And the other question is, if we know all the difference between all the different foundations like us, Common Conservancy, Linux Foundation, Open Collective, there may be others as well.
Free Software Foundation.
Yeah, and all of these are perfectly fine organizations.
You have contacts, I have contacts with Common Conservancy, you with Linux Foundations.
Yeah, but honestly, the big thing that would make me prefer for this project, would make me prefer the LF is the education team. Because again, we can bootstrap them and I could hand them some materials that they could get started with.
Question, in regards to the education part, a part of the, correct me if I'm wrong, people, but a part of the Puppet revenue stream was in its certification as well. Certification was also certification of people that could go out and say, hey, I have this Puppet cap right here and I'm allowed to.
And I have literally no clue if that's still part of their thing.
Because the Linux Foundation about that earlier today. The PE certification program is still a thing, and David is going to check and see what the interest level is with us having certifications and trainings on our side that are mutually beneficial, because there is no reason why we can't have an OpenVox training program that is useful for customers, forming users, and whatever else comes along. And then they can deliver PE trainings, us or Red Hat can deliver foreman-based certifications and all that. It's none of this steps on anybody, and there might be some real chance for collaboration there.
I'm going to be very, very, as the person who built education for years, I'm going to be very surprised if they go for that.
Yeah, I mean, even if they don't, it's not hard to structure stuff to where it coexists nicely, even if they don't want anything to do with it.
We can build our own.
Yeah, we absolutely can. I'm not saying anything otherwise.
I was just asking if that was possible under the TLF umbrella. If we were, perhaps I'm misunderstanding here again, but if the legal entity goes under the TLF umbrella and offers their certification and training and such, if that doesn't go in the
I mean, most likely, Perforce would still offer a Puppet, Puppet Enterprise certification, and it, like say, it might coexist. And I mean, I think that's true. If we're mostly, doing stuff on the language and on open source and whatever else, it's really not going to step on the stuff that they do.
Right. So long as we're smart, whether it's through the Linux Foundation or anybody else, or on our own, so long as we structure our trainings in a way to where we separate, I'm going to use certification because that's the thing that's easiest to talk about, but training in general. If we separate certifications for the stuff that works everywhere and have a separate programmer certification for the stuff that only works in FOSS or only works in PE or only works in thing yet to come, as long as we put those dividing lines in, because they're also natural breakpoints in what you get trained and certified on, then ideally there's collaboration, but even if there's not, they don't fight with each other. And there's nothing keeping us from doing it, even if Perforce doesn't want it. Like, they have no leg to stand on and say we can't do it, because it's on our stuff.
And LF has a robust resale program. You know, we could be developing stuff and they could just deliver it and make some money off it if they really wanted to. You know, I mean, your Perforce could be delivering some of the LF stuff if they wanted to set up a relationship like that. You know, there's I think there's a bunch of ways you can do this without completely stepping on toes.
Does the training programs from LF, when they are delivered and sold, do they provide any funding back to the project that's associated with it?
Absolutely. 100%.
So that could be a revenue stream for
it
this
is
project.
100% how that works. The
Okay.
certification and the way I understand it, training doesn't make nearly as much money as certification. I'm making this
That
crap
wouldn't
up,
surprise
right?
me.
Because you know, I just overhear conversations when I'm in the room with people. But my understanding is actually certifications are a good chunk of the revenue stream, and absolutely the exams for the individual project. You know, so if you go take if you go take one of the Kubernetes exams, that goes to that money. The vast majority of it goes to the CNCF. If you take one of the exams on whatever little individual project, Helm or something like that, most of that goes to the Helm project.
Gotcha.
So that's how that works.
As somebody who was involved in building certification, we're probably years away from getting building that.
Yeah.
Well, it requires a lot of documentation to be done before we can do it.
Like we all
But
get
we can do
locked in-
training. We can absolutely do training right now.
Then, if that's the case, would that not be something as an item to add at the
Documentation.
PMC and documentation and training and get a track going on, since that seems to be also a interesting point to make this project alive?
Even
you say
without
we're
training,
far-
I think documentation
when you
may
say
be a
we're far
committee
from
that
being
needs
able
to
to
exist.
Documentation
organizing yourselves, or do you
Yeah.
just generally don't?
I think it starts as documentation and then we add training.
To be quite honest,
Documentation is ready.
the reason why I'm so adamant about this is you guys see me here in this nice fancy suit and stuff. I know the reason is because once I had the opportunity to take a training, take a certification, and it made my living as I am today.
It is a
And that can make a change for many people around the world in their livelihoods. If we want to make this project a success, that would be a fundamental cornerstone. And I would like to see this happen.
I guess I was saying that training and certification can't exist without the documentation. And until unless we are planning to steal Perforce's documentation, which
Get people thinking.
might be a problem, because that's a closed source and copyrighted.
It's not closed source. It's not closed source.
No, that's true. You can just go
All of Puppet Server, all of Puppet
Yeah, hang on. Sorry, I can't possibly take any minutes if I'm trying to. So, get some order in the room. Ben, who's talking?
I don't know.
I think we were all basically getting at the same thing from a minutes perspective, is that we need to get our documentation in order to then provide training, to then be lined up so that we could then eventually provide certification. And that when we get to the point of delivering training and delivering certification, that the Linux Foundation will provide a very good avenue for doing so. And it's just one of many reasons why joining there might be a good idea.
I personally think that training is out of the purview of like Vox. I think we should focus on clear documentation and onboarding documents and making it easy to consume things. And I think there's plenty of companies out there that can deal with like that.
But the point is that LF has a team that just handles that. They will if in the case of the training, like I said, I'm willing to see that with stuff that we've got that's just sitting there collecting dust right now. Like I will happily give that to them and get that whole process kickstarted. And I mean we have expertise in the room. But the point is, all they'll do is they'll come to us for some expertise. So they'll ask questions. They'll have us write some stuff, whatever. But it's not like it's. But then it's out of our hands. Like they'll take care of all of the copy editing and the actual delivery of it and scheduling things with people and blah blah blah. It is a solved problem at that point.
Yeah, I guess what I think all of us were trying to get at is this idea that there is a SIG that makes sense to exist for the combination of documentation, training, and certification. Not that we have to execute on any of them, but like Vox itself, if we're going to be giving trainings, like have someone giving trainings around our documentation, probably should have someone, like a group that's focused on making sure that that is of a quality that reflects well on the project.
People have been giving like.
And also, we don't have to do that today. We'll
I'll throw a question in, Bruce. For those who've written types and providers, and I don't mean resource API, but like GitHub stuff.
The proper ones.
Where does the documentation live?
There's a book that's about that thick. It was written in 2011. It's public types and providers.
It's still relevant because
Yeah. I have. I will happily share a PDF of it with you if you want.
I would actually say Gary's blog is still an exceptionally good resource for
Yeah,
this.
I find, but my point is this should be more easily available and findable.
Yes, it should.
You said I have a PDF, I'll give it to you. Awesome. I don't direct instantly because I just go into the code, but
I will give it to you,
and I will share
I
it.
will not publish it on the internet. Because it is very much, the authors don't care anymore, but it is very much a copyright infringement.
But we as a group should maybe write some of those things from scratch. Don't steal it.
We'll build our own.
Alright, so I volunteered to run a documentation SIG. Let's see how that's
All right.
Wait,
Before you sit down, I do have one big question for you.
Okay.
You told us all the reasons why we should go to LF.
Yes.
What are the reasons why we should not?
I don't have any off of the top of my head other than
Why did
it's
you
just
choose
other
not
than
to
it's
do
just
it?
effort, you know.
I talked to Tosh about it the other day, and he said no, that would be a stupid idea.
I think you
Why
would,
do you think
I think you would have to go to projects that have decided that they that they want to keep their stuff under FSF or something for the kids or whatever, whichever other competing organizations are out there, but. The closest thing I can come up with that I've ever heard anybody argue about is that LF's kind of corporate these days. They've gotten large. There's I think like 300 people that work there or something now. But again, they handle a lot of money, but they're paying Linus Torvalds and they're and like I say they're sponsoring all these projects. And they do a lot of good work. And if any of you have never been to like open source summit and stuff like that, it's fun. So I'm a fan.
Maybe we should also think about looking for the English words, but like how companies view the Linux Foundation,
I will tell you this: if you go to the sponsors page on the LF site and start scrolling, it eventually will crash your browser.
It goes forever.
Yeah, I mean, every company you've ever
Then you
heard
have a
of
shitty
software seems
browser.
like.
No, it just goes forever.
It just goes that long.
I did it just a minute ago to see if my company was on it.
Yeah.
It goes forever.
So, that's okay. So, I don't have any objection on the Linux Foundation, of course, but would you mind if we make a comparison with other foundations and things, and then we decided that we see the reasons why Linux Foundation is probably better, because it probably is. So,
Do you have another one that you want to
yes, so
suggest?
I would like to grab information regarding the Commons Conservancy, and maybe, we are already in contact with the NLNet, and we are getting funding from that, maybe, possibly.
We have 13 minutes before they're going to start telling us to leave. So I have no problem with that if you can talk
Just
quickly.
meet and then
Is that an online, or is that an offline conversation then, or something we just want to?
Oh, you're not asking if you can come up here and make a pitch
No,
right
no,
now.
no, no, it's
You're,
just
you're saying we should talk about it later.
offline, because I'm gonna talk with these people the 20th
Yes,
of February.
yes.
So
I think we just have our second member of the documentation and training SIG.
That's the biggest one now.
This is the foundation thing.
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now.
Yeah, SPI is 501c3, if that matters to anyone.
And LF is 6. I just.
Yeah, I checked that with LF.
He just left. Did we decide that we're gonna do SIGs on the wiki? Is that what the story was?
That's what it sounded like.
Can somebody put together some SIG pages for the ones we just talked about?
I'll do that. Oh.
Sorry,
I've got those things.
We're closing up,
listed
so
at
I
least.
was trying to make sure that we got everything sort of collected, and the things that we decided were action items had people working on them going forward. So
I've
I
got
think that
rough
you two were
notes.
going to figure out some foundation stuff and compare them, and maybe send something out to the mailing lists.
I've got notes. I took pictures.
Could we have people assigned to things to choose these?
I'm gonna work on updating governance things.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I have tried to take sort of notes, a bit late to the party, in a GitHub issue. I've posted it to one of the two slats. Why we've got two slats, I don't know. But if people want to add comments and, more importantly, clarifications, that'd be good, because I'm sure I've missed nuances of conversations and missed some bits altogether.
Jesus, I have to stop.
But
I think this is the most crowded I've seen a room this late on a Wednesday.
I have never ever seen any like config management camp where this many people stayed.
Yeah.
well, in fairness, I couldn't get a trainer for
very
what.
motivated, yeah.
Like I was warning everybody. I was warning David that like everybody's gonna ditch it at noon, and
That's what I'm saying.
I mean I guess everybody ditched there at noon, but
Yes, that's.
we're all still here. That shocks me.
We just really like you, Ben.
So what is the process for becoming an LF member? Is that like a thing you can like go out and do next month, or is it like?
I don't think it takes, Steve's probably a better resource than I am, but I think it's kind of just you give them money and how do I become an LF member? How does Secure become LF?
Well, more just like timeline. Is this something that we have to get them working on right now, or is it?
I
wait till we
would
make
say
decisions?
I would say basically it's whenever we're ready to pull the trigger. I mean, because the joining is trivial, and and actually like convincing them to take us on as a project is relatively trivial as well. We just have to have our ducks in a row and say here.
We got lots of ducks.
Yeah,
we know how to line them up.
Yeah, and again, I know the person in charge of that, and we can get it fast tracked. I'm pretty sure. It shouldn't take more than a few days to get everything all settled.
Cool.
And open data went from forms to the part of the Linux Foundation very quickly. Yeah.
Very
Gene, you're back there. Yep. Do you have everything? You talked to a lot of people about infrastructure and a lot of things. Did you get everything figured out today so that we can walk away and you know who you're going to talk to and how to get in touch with everybody?
I told everybody to get in touch with me because I knew I will not remember who asked me for stuff. It looks like I've got a good handful of direct messages, so that's a good thing. If y'all would sanity check me real quick, the high-level points that we now have issues under an epic then made for infrastructure design on GitHub are getting rsync set up, getting mirrors under voxpeculiar.org, managing GitHub with OpenTofu, document what's needed for the CI and packaging infrastructure, and then there'll be new things spun out from that. But there's a lot of conversation. I need to get all that written down so that we can get feedback on it. And then I added two other in based off the conversations. One to take the pulse of the room real quick. Do we want any kind of infrastructure related to automatic bug reporting, or is that just something for another time? And the other one was the work you did around Dropsandi. Do we need anything infrastructure-wise so that we can receive usage stats?
Yes, we also need to make an ethical decision as to whether or not we are going to allow that to happen.
I see no reason not to, so long as it's properly sanitized in the way that you did before.
It is very properly sanitized, but I know that a lot of people still have objections.
I think there's some good conversations to be had on that. I don't think now's the time. But yeah,
I could do like a 2-minute real quick, and then you can, if you want, you can write it down, or we could just have it on the email, on the mailing list.
Let's just do it on the mailing list, because we
We've
can talk
also
about what you've done and what Home Assistant Project did, because those
Yeah.
two together, I think, show that we can do it in a very responsible way. We can take what you did and supplement what they've done, and have a really, really transparent thing that I don't think people scream about too much.
I do also want to point out one thing, like this here is just one meeting of many. We do meet every single month. It is it's a Zoom call, and it's currently, like, it's a little bit weird, a little bit hard to find. Tim, you're gonna have to explain that now, because there's like several layers of broken links. But everybody in here is invited to come, and Perforce is also they don't, not every time, but they usually show up with a few people, and the idea is just like, this is our regular government thing. So you're all welcome to come anytime. If we have something private to discuss, we'll do a private meeting.
About that, isn't an hour a bit much for the Vox Populi and OpenVox and Perforce stuff?
Is that too much?
You mean not enough?
This is not enough. Are the topics too much or the time?
Maybe the topics get complicated more often, I don't know.
I mean, there's a meeting coming up soon. We can decide if we want to restructure
We
how
can
the meeting
see
works.
when's that
The next meeting is the 11th, which is really terrible for me because I get home on the 10th. I think it's the 11th. It's the Tuesday.
It's always the second Tuesday of each month.
And what time would that be in local time?
Local time?
18:30, depending on time zones. It's complicated.
That's still being announced on Slack.
Yes, but the link is incorrect on Slack. Tim, can you tell people how to find the link, the proper link?
So it's very easy. You can Google for Perforce Community Hours. You will find a nice website somewhere on perforce.com or puppet.com. It has all the office hours linked. Perforce has their own office hours, but also the Vox Populi link is on this calendar. You can download an iCal file which has the correct time zone, so you don't have to ask me or keep it in mind. It's very handy. And when this time approaches, you jump into the IRC channel or the Vox Populi Slack, and somewhere will post the correct Zoom link.
I believe after last month, the one that gets posted in the office hours Slack channel was fixed. After the meeting started. Or David went in and fixed it, is what I believe he told me.
Well, I'll validate with them. So context of what happened is that calendar is a Google calendar, and the thing that posted in Slack is also driven by that same Google calendar. And guess what Perforce doesn't use? They killed all of that. And so nobody can actually log in and get to that Google Calendar, and they haven't figured out how to do anything else yet.
David's got a new calendar
think
that
that we need,
Microsoft made that he has shared a link for.
but not in there. But not in that Google Calendar that drives that webpage.
Yeah.
So I think that at some point, relatively soon, we need to make our own. But that's for another day because we have 4 minutes left. The privacy thing, I'll talk about that next 11th or 12th or whatever the meeting is on the Tuesday. There was another point brought up about talking to everybody about Fastly. Do you need to, is that just part of the mirror conversation?
I knew I was missing something. Thank you.
Okay, I'll get you his contact. Did you have anything else that you need out of this? Like something that people need to do or whatever? How about you, Nick?
I still think at some point we should talk about product versus engineering, how we split the responsibilities with it. We can do that on Slack.
We can do that in one of the syncs too. So we can get kind of face to face. It's not a very good time for Australia, but as we have talked about splitting and doing multiple different time zones, but we haven't had enough people showing up to make that worth it yet. But now as this project is getting more momentum, I think that there's a really, really strong possibility that we are going to. So keep that in mind. Do you know what needs to happen with PMC? At least for the short term?
Yeah, I think we're covered. And also to all of you, keep in mind to apply for a PMC seat in the next 3 weeks. That would be helpful.
It's a lot of fun.
I don't head home until Saturday. The blog post will come out early next week because I'm not going to have time to write it before I get home. It's just not going to happen. But the blog post about the elections and all will get put up next week. At least that's my intention.
And all of these things here, these are mostly the 6 things that we talked about. Those are on top of the PMC. So you can run for the PMC. You can also get involved in these. Just get involved. And a reminder, like I said earlier, it's awesome if you throw $10 down, if you do donations and everything. It's more awesome if you talk to people that you have influence with your companies. Remind them, especially ones that have large open source Puppet infrastructures, remind them that if this project doesn't succeed, they are going to be in a world of hurt. And it would be a lot cheaper for them to donate than it would be to convert or to port to something else.
Regarding that, one, how can companies or entities or whatever donate? And second, how does that work when if it ever gets to the TLF umbrella?
So today, if you go to voxkupla.org, look up in the top right, there's a sponsor link, and it tells you there's 2 ways right now that you can contribute. Go to Open Collective or GitHub sponsors. There's depending on what your corporate policies are, those will be. I think companies will find it easier to go through Open Collective, unless you're Microsoft.
Elective is better because we don't have to pay the GitHub fees.
Yes.
Even better, we get more money through Open Collective.
And you get a proper receipt for your text stuff. So that's the main reason why we even joined the open source collective.
And when we go, if we go to the Linux Foundation, everything will change, but we'll have it all documented at that point.
It'll be basically the same thing, except you go to the Linux Foundation instead of Open Collective.
Yeah, exactly. Name change.
What's that?
The name change.
Name change. But you got to go update it. Any other questions or thoughts or anything? And I started it to be like speaking.
Maybe also a general announcement. The situation in Brussels seems to have quieted down, and the things seem to be fine again. So no need to worry about things not stopping anywhere.
Thanks, Garrett. They might be quite